Yeah, I've talked about this before. The saw that I use most for my wood cutting for firewood and for knocking trees down and all of that, the 372 I use mostly for ripping. For my other work, I use this 55 Rancher. It's the power weight ratio is it's just a handier saw. I don't need a big saw for cutting firewood. It's actually just more dangerous. So I got the 55 and the 51, and I use them pretty much exclusively for firewood cutting. And for the handy little odd jobs, though. Now I do have that little 240 that I picked up that is handy for odd little jobs. They don't use as much fuel. Parts are cheap. I don't, I run the 55, I run a 20-inch bar on. I got an 18 on the 51. And most of the time, 20-inch bar is plenty much. I don't need more than that. You start running a long bar, it just costs you a lot more for replacement. Well, I had a problem. My 55 was having fuel leakage problems. What it was, if you filled it plump full, you would start seeing fuel leaking around, on the handguard. And particularly if you tipped it on its side, it would leak fuel out. Well, most saws of the more modern ones, the older ones are one piece, but most of them now, it's actually two pieces. The fuel tank is a whole separate piece with the handle on, and they are held together with these rubber snubbers that poke through and go into the parts in the handle, and that's what actually cuts your vibration down. And then you'll feel like this now, the case is magnesium, the tank is plastic. So it keeps the weight down, but you still have the strength of the magnesium. Well, the problem I was having with this fuel leakage, I knew what it was, but I hesitated to take it apart in the middle of winter. I decided now I'm using the saw for odds and ends. I needed to fix it. Where the fuel line runs out of the tank, it's got the filter down inside. That's got a weight on it that moves around, so it'll go wherever you tip it. But there's a seal where it comes out of the tank, where the fuel line comes out. And this little seal had gone bad. Well, now the reason this seal went bad, in part it happens if your rubbers, your insulators start getting like this one. You can see it's kind of bent, just from wear. Well, I keep some of them on hand. They're a cheap replacement. They're easy to fix. There's 4 of them that hold it all together. So they went, they had more slop in them than they should have. And this tank seal runs right up against the seal where it goes into the carburetor compartment. Well, when you get a lot of slop, it puts stress on that line. Well, okay. The regular Husqvarna line, this is the standard stock one, is rubber. And, well, this line is still good. I'm going to replace it. But I was going to mention a problem I have had before, and I've seen fairly commonly. If you go into a store to buy a replacement line, they sell this new plastic stuff, which isn't really very flexible in the first place. It's pretty stiff stuff, and you got to have that so that it'll move around in the tank. You'll sometimes have them where you'll run out at half a tank because that thing is parked at an odd angle. It didn't go to the bottom of the tank. That's why, like this is the new type filter. I actually like these old ones because that's a heavy piece of metal, that bangs around in there. That goes to the bottom of the tank. But this plastic line You might not see it. This stuff gets stiff. And it's not like I'm running alcohol. This is a non-alcohol fuel. This has never had alcohol in it. But that is what happens. And you can see it's kind of blistered up. So eventually it just locks into one place, gets stiff. It's got to stay in that position. And then if your snubbers get worn, it works on this, so it's a hard piece pushing against the seal, and that's what cuts the seal. But I see my old rubber one that was in there is kind of wore where that seal goes through the tank, so I'm going to replace it. But rather than use this stuff, which I have just a miserable track record with, I just don't care for that stuff. It's too stiff, and it gets stiffer. Well, I was able to order in the regular Husqvarna part that is the right piece of rubber. So that will make a good seal on the tank seal and make a good flop around in the tank for the fuel to be picked up. They can be a pain in the ass to put in because they're a tight fit. But you need that tight fit to get that seal. But I don't know, I see everybody, when they replace them with this stuff, and I've just had horrible luck with this stuff. Like I said, I don't run alcohol. I use that high octane non-alcohol fuel. But that stuff just goes bad. And I've seen that for years. It used to be, in particular, the old British motorcycles always came with that clear, which yellowed shortly, plastic line that it got, after it had been on the bike for a while, it got locked into one position, and if you tried to take that off, it would break. You always end up replacing them. So I don't recommend this plastic stuff for fuel line. A lot of times, like on motorcycles, you'll see this stuff used as a carburetor vent line. Well, that's all right. That doesn't have to really flex. But for a fuel line, it's well worth hutting up the real rubber stuff because it's a nuisance to take apart. Not so much for me. I've taken these things apart so many times. And I've got a lot of spare parts. Like here's a tank that's got a good seal in it. It's one that I had bought, saw that somebody dropped a tree on and broke the handle. Well, broke a lot of parts on the saw, but to me, when somebody drops a tree on a saw, that's a treasure trove of parts. So I'm quick to buy them, because you can get a lot of good little odd parts, screws and stuff even, that you wouldn't think. But I got to clean this tank up, put the new seal in, put the line in, and slap it back together. But they ain't that tough to work on. That's why I like these saws. And this 55 and the 51 are almost identical. It's just a different piston and cylinder. But the parts are all interchangeable. So that's why anytime a 51 or a 55 comes up on eBay that somebody has dropped a tree on, I'm there. I like to have the extra parts. Because you never know when, this odd kind of stuff is going to happen. Things just wear, especially, like I say, this one uses those rubber snubbers that hold the fuel tank and the handle in place. Now the newer saw, they've changed that. They've gone away from it. My 372 has the coil springs, regular steel springs. And I see, looking at this little new one, that's got springs in it too, rather than the rubber. And that's it's a better deal in the long run. Especially where I would wear these rubbers out was ripping, because then you're kind of pushing on the saw, and it would strain on them rubbers. But it's not a big deal. But they are not that expensive, and they're easily found. That's the one thing I like about these old 51 or 55s parts. There's a lot of parts out there for them, because they use them same rubbers for a long time for many different models. I'm always looking for parts interchangeability. But this I had to order in because every place I went in the lawn and garden departments, I'd say I want this size fuel line. They'd say, oh yeah, here we got some of this. Oh, I stay away from the wonder stuff. Go back to the original. Just works a lot better. Because I've had them where, like I say, the connection to the carburetor will get stretched out, and there's no clamps. They just snap on there. Well, if they don't seal airtight, you start sucking air. You know, these old rubber ones, they'll seal. But I see, you know, I think every saw shop, when they replace them, they throw some of this crap on there. Avoid that if you can. You'll be a lot happier with it in the long run if you got rubber on there. It's always nice to have the original parts. There's a reason that they used a certain material in a certain place. You know, you can't just go swapping parts willy-nilly. You know, it has to be a reason for it. I'm gonna put this thing back together. But that's why I like these old ones, you know, that the parts are so readily available. And I have no idea what I even paid for it. I've had it kicking around for a while because I knew I was going to be needing it. But the seal, I should have ordered one of them in. I should have them on hand, but I've got a couple old tanks laying around here that have got good seals in them from the salvaged machines. So that's another thing. If you got a saw that you like, look for one somebody dropped a tree on. It's good to have them parts.